So, just got done listening to recent episode of the Atheist Experience earlier today, episode number 811. And there was a caller on named Johanan from Wisconsin who had an argument that he said was in favor of God's existence, but it never really got that far. But ultimately trying to prove mind-body dualism, I think. I'm not going to go into the particulars, but there's one part of it that I just want to focus on that didn't sit right with me, and I've been thinking about it throughout the day, and I think I've got my issues pinned down. Just one part of the conversation I'm going to focus on, and here's a quote from Johanan. He says, "If two things are the same, A equals B, then everything true of A is also true of B, right?" And Matt disagreed a little bit, but ultimately came around and as Tracy pointed out, said you're just talking about using two things to describe one object. You're not saying that A and B are two objects, they're just one, and there's two descriptions of it. Now this might sound a little bit confusing. I'm just going to use a real simple example that helps with this. Is you can take two distinct ideas. For example, you can have an idea of Neil Armstrong, and you can have an idea of the first man to walk on the moon. And it just happens to be that these two ideas are the same guy, right? Even though you can conceive of, well, we're not going to go into that right now. And so what Johanan says is, you know, since we can conceive of like a mind existing in a matter-independent world, we can conceive of minds existing in worlds where there are no atoms, no molecules, so forth. But we cannot conceive the same about brains. Then they can't be the same thing because one of these is conceivable, the other is not. Therefore, they can't be the same. I disagree. And there's just like one little sentence I can focus on here. Take the following. I cannot conceive of matter being immaterial. Here's where it gets a little bit tricky. Was that sentence a description of matter? No, it wasn't. It was a description of me and my imagination. That's two different things. It's a little tricky, but that's just, I cannot conceive of matter being immaterial. No, it's a statement about me. So the issue here being, does my statement about my imagination about a thing translate into actual properties of the thing itself? I don't think so. And I think I can prove this going back to my Neil Armstrong example. For example, can we conceive of a Neil Armstrong that was not the first man to walk on the moon? And yeah, sure, we can. We can imagine elaborate scenarios where it was actually the Russians that got to the moon first, but they were uncharacteristically modest about it, and they just never bothered to tell anybody. Sure, that works. So we can conceive of a Neil Armstrong, not only that wasn't the first to go on the moon, that never set foot on the moon, right? Sure, it was an elaborate hoax. The conspiracy theorists had it right. Who knew? So we can conceive of Neil Armstrong that never set foot on the moon. Can we conceive of a first man on the moon that never set foot on the moon? No. So Neil Armstrong can't share that property with the first man on the moon, so Neil Armstrong can't be the first man to ever walk on the moon. We just definitively proved it. Right? I don't think so. Because you can actually see how this, you know, you can do reductio ad absurdum and just apply this to anything. You know, any named person you can conceive of. We can apply the exact same argument, and we just prove that they weren't the first man on the moon. Therefore, we just prove that there's no such thing as a first man on the moon. You can apply this to anything also. Can we conceive of a being that is the first being to create a universe? Well, we could apply that argument again, and actually there is no such being that was the first one to create a universe, right? But if there is no such thing, then there is no such God. No such thing as God. I don't think that argument worked out the way you wanted it to. Or, when we talk about these things, we're just talking about our imaginations and not properties of the things. That's what I would go with, because I just proved that God doesn't exist using his premise. But I'll be generous and concede his premise for him, because I'm a nice guy. Yeah, I don't think his argument works.